Hey, so, yeah, the title, um, the title of this. So I do want to say off the top that, this was an all me thing. Yes, it was, a gay individual involved, but I have no issues with who he is as a person. Never did. He's an awesome person, was an awesome friend, looking back because, it was while things are happening, it's kind of an interesting situation, right? But ultimately, it was just a matter of, people trying to do what they thought was best for themselves at that time, right? And so, for a little bit of background on how that situation happened, essentially, I grew up, and I've talked about this before. I grew up in the church, right? So I grew up in my grandfather's church, and I also went to an evangelical K through 8th school. It was even though it was a private school, it wasn't like one of those like super expensive private schools or anything like that. It was just it was a private school in that it was a school that was connected to a church, not my grandfather's church, another church. So it just happened to be part of the church and how that particular church operated, right? So I had an upbringing that had not only was a Christian upbringing, but also I had influence from different kind of ideologies within the Christian church and, different denominations. Because I grew up in a Black church, which tend to skew heavily, Pentecostal, things like that, and how they operate. And like I was saying, with the actual schools, evangelical schools. So I got a little bit of everything going on. There's this fly going around, so if you see my eyes going around, it's because I'm looking at him. It's like, dude, come on now, I'm trying to record. All right. So anyway, yes, young bliss. So I grew up with a lot of ideals around, who I was or supposed to be as a person. And that was essentially, the idea was I was growing up to be a wife to someone, right? That was always going to be my main goal. In the Bible, it says women are helpmeet. So that meant that I was growing up to meet my counterpart. The person who, is missing a rib out here, right? That was who I was growing up to be. And so, by the time I, was starting to go off to school, and when I say go off to school, I mean college, university. I was 18 at the time. By the time I was going off to school, the primary thing in my mind was making sure that I met someone who I could marry and start a family with, right? And that's not to say that I wasn't ambitious in my own right, and I didn't, that was the only reason why I went to school. No, I was, I did go to school to get my degree and use my degree, and I have, but also there was this unspoken understanding that my primary role would always be the family and the church. And in that way, I'd be serving God through my family. And so that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to marry children young, so that we could all serve God together, right? So that was the main objective I had in my head. And the interesting thing about that, it was more of an unspoken thing with the church I grew up in, like a woman's place. So nobody explicitly said that, but on the evangelical side, they did explicitly say that. So that was, at school and even some of the campus ministries I was in, right? So what that ended up doing was it created a firestorm of me not really truly understanding and knowing my identity. And then also I was working with, just emotional unavailability on being emotionally unavailable on my end, and not actually recognizing that I was emotionally unavailable. Right? Because at that point in time, I didn't even exist to myself. I was just this person that the church and other people would tell me I was, right? And so I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of fears, just kind of a lot of panic over, trying to fulfill this perfect person that God would accept and love, essentially, looking back. Now, I wasn't conscious of this. This is all looking back at that time. But again, it was one of those things where it was, this is the destiny that I'm supposed to fulfill, so I need to focus on that. And anything that kind of took away from that, gave me anxiety, gave me worry. And so that's how I fell into this, instance of basically, dating someone who did not want me in the slightest. And that's not to say that we didn't get along. We did. I can say that we were honestly, friends. We were in the same circles and things like that. So it wasn't any kind of weird, animosity or anything like that. We did get along pretty good, but in my mind, I was just looking for someone warm-blooded, male, and Christian, because that's what checked off all the boxes for myself, right? And so, which effectively meant that I ignored a lot of the red flags that I was never actually explicitly taught, right? Everything had to do with me up until this point, how to be a good wife. They said the Proverbs 31 woman, right? So I knew all about how to be a Proverbs 31 woman, but I was never necessarily taught the counterpart on who would make a good husband, right? Everything I learned about being a husband was, he's the head of the household and you should submit to him, and everything of that nature. I didn't learn anything else about guys, nor was I actually sat down and taught about boys or men or anything. Nobody did that. I never got any birds or bees talk or anything like that. Everything was just all the ideals that I learned along the way from church, right? And that's not trying to skirt responsibility or anything like that. Like, I have learned as I've grown, but I'm just, setting the stage for how something like this could happen, right? So again, this person got with this person, and, of course I noticed that I won't say he was repulsed by me. Like I said, we were friends, but honestly, it was obvious that it just stayed platonic, even though we agreed to, go together, essentially, right? And other people noticed it too. They're just like, this is weird. Like, this, we don't know what's going on. And I just, I would try to ignore it and everything. Just like, no, he's a Christian. I'm a Christian. Everything's good, right? No. But essentially, and there's no kind of juicy details or anything here. Like I said, he ain't want me, so it wasn't anything like anything happened. And that's not to say, I know there's other things that popped off with other people where things, could, but for me, no, it stayed pretty, nothing ever happened or anything, but there was a lot. It was high emotionally, a lot, there's a little bit of drama sprinkled in, and things like that. And so what I appreciate from that experience looking back was that I did not, that nothing actually went further with that because of how much I needed to learn, even though I was surrounded by people who were pairing off and getting married. And like my first year in school, I had friends who were getting married every single year of school, right? So I was surrounded by it. But I knew now, looking back, that I needed that experience so I can actually grow up and learn and experience, who I was and why I thought and responded and experienced things the way I did, right? Because like I said, like I've said before, who you choose to partner with can completely derail the trajectory of your life if you don't choose correctly, right? And that's something that, like, we weren't exactly, you were taught that in the church, but it was always in a way that was like kind of scary, right? Like, don't marry someone who's outside the church. Now that's just they'd say, oh, who you choose is important. But usually when they meant who you choose, what is important was, make sure that they're Christian, and, make sure that they, loved God, and, went to church and things like that. It wasn't a lot of the things that we say today makes a good partner, right? And for me, a lot of the things that I learned came from purity culture. That guy. And specifically the book I Kissed Dating Goodbye. Right? And I think I mentioned that before here. But essentially in I Kissed Dating Goodbye, it's as the title said, anti-dating. Because they believed that dating was teaching you how to be divorced. Because they said when you're dating different people, and you start breaking things off with people, it's teaching you how to break off things, right? As opposed to courtship, which is you make the decision that someone could be a spouse, and then, your families come together, and then, you court for a short period of time, then you're engaged for a short period of time, and then boom, and then you're married, right? And so these are like, literal kids, 18-year-olds who are, courting for like 6 months and then being engaged for like 2 or 3. All this was happening this span of a year for some people that I was watching, right? And for me, looking back, I was so heartbroken that I could not have that same experience. It would say, oh yeah, let God, write your love story, which I don't have an issue with that in and of itself. But when they said their idea of letting God write your love story was just, choose someone who is, warm-blooded, opposite sex, and, says they're Christian, and then that's God putting you together, right? That was the idea of God putting you together. And so I really, really, really thought that there was something wrong with me. I thought that God didn't love me. I was confused because they tell you, if you're meant to be single, you'll know. I was always taught that. They say, yeah, if you're meant to be single, you'll know, and you won't have a desire for marriage at all. So it's like, okay, well, I don't know, and that desire is still there, and people are pairing off, what's happening, right? So again, that kind of emotional, being emotionally unavailable, mostly because, I didn't really know my own identity, mixed with some anxiety, mixed with just all the things is what led to that decision that, again, so glad that it ended eventually, because we were kind of on and off for a while. But I am glad that it ended, and I was able to look back on that experience, right? Because what ended up happening with me too is, and I've talked too about having, the abusive boyfriend and whatnot, and same kind of issues that were going on. And what ended up happening there was I started recognizing my pattern that I had, and I said, okay, there's some things that I need to stop and go back to the drawing board for, right? Because I can't keep letting this happen to myself. Because at this point, by the time that happened, I was well into my 20s. I was closer to 30 than 20 at that point, when I recognized that pattern. My ex-boyfriend, he wasn't, at least to my knowledge, he wasn't gay. But again, might as well have been, just because of the emotional, being emotionally unavailable, essentially. And for me, and I'll get into this in a few other videos, because I'm really big into wellness, And there's actually 8 dimensions of wellness, right? Taking a tiny tangent, but you'll see where I'm going here. And so for the dimensions of wellness, there's the one that most people know is physical fitness, but it's physical, emotional, social, spiritual, intellectual, occupational. I'm probably missing some, but there's 8 of them, right? And what ends up happening for the vast majority of people, you're never really taught how to properly balance all these, right? There's usually one that wins out. And for me, it was the spiritual, right? And, people, what's the saying? Being so heavenly minded that you're no earthly good. Kind of harsh, but that's essentially what happens when you don't have that balance in your life, is that you start neglecting all of the practical applications that you need to use, right? So the church taught me all this stuff about love, dating, and relationships, and said, this is how God wants things to be done. And I was just like, this ain't really working out as far as the real world goes, right? I was like, this ain't it. The way I'm going right now, like I'm picking up guys who are literally unavailable, right? The gay dude, essentially. I'm picking up guys who are unavailable in other ways, and then I'm also unavailable myself, right? And so it's like, not only am I picking up people who are unavailable, but I don't even know how to navigate, becoming mature and whole myself, so I can stop doing that, choosing those people, right? So I can stop doing that for myself and actually grow as a person, so I can both add to someone else's life, because I don't want to be a burden to someone else, but also too, like I said, choosing the right person has an extremely important impact on the trajectory of your life. I've said previously that we know the importance of having a partner in business, right? If you walk up to the average person and say it's important to have a business partner, what will they say? Yes, of course it's important to have a business partner. Who wouldn't want to have a really great business partner by their side? And then you ask the same question about having a whole life partner, and business is just a facet of life, and I'm like, I don't know about that, right? And there's kind of a disconnect there about the importance of having having a positive influence in your life, and also being the one who's a positive influence in someone else's life, right? And so I had to stop myself at that point, and I did. I went very introspective, and I just told myself, like, there's some like undoing that needs to happen here, right? And I need to just sit here and observe both myself and how other people operate, because clearly something ain't right here. And at this point too, it was really interesting, because a lot of those couples that I idolized in college, and I saw people pairing off, and I was getting pretty down on myself too, right? I wasn't feeling like I felt like I wasn't living up to my womanly purpose, as people were pairing off and I wasn't, and I'm like, but my destiny is to be someone's helpmeet, and it's just not happening. As I was getting older, I was seeing a lot of these unions end up in divorce and separation, and that's not to say that I don't want to make any comments on anyone personally or anything, but just to see that, I was just like, okay, I see what purity culture and some of these ideals and all the above is doing to a lot of these people who I'm pretty sure truly love God, but they're really just trying to figure out life for themselves, right? And so where I got into where I learned a lot of as far as navigating coaching and At one point when I've talked about how I had the Becoming the Right Person blog and things like that, ended up picking up a lot of what I wasn't being taught along the way, right? I was like, wait a minute. So if I can't get, the full picture, if nobody's going to tell me, I'm going to have to go out here and find it, right? I'm just have to find it for myself some kind of way, right? I'm just going to have to find it. And then that's how I got into, my blog that I used to have that I mentioned before. And, just making sure that I'm getting enough information along the way on how to not only help myself, but help other people, right? Because now looking back, I'm just like, whoa, that really happened. Like, it is the cringiest, it is the cringiest thing. Like, and again, that's not to say that I have anything against him as a person. That's why, y'all. Anything against, it's not that. Like I said before, this was a me thing. This was a me thing. Right, because I don't even know if even with the right information, I would have made the right choice because, like, I was 18. If you're 18 and watching, no offense, but it's just, the whole older and wiser, and sometimes some things you just gotta learn. You just gotta learn for yourself, right? But like I said, looking hindsight is 2020. I am, even though at the time I was very upset, I am glad that a lot of that happened, because that's what put me on the path to truly trying to find and learn things for myself, and learning how to look at myself and others as a whole person, like I was giving the ideas of wellness and all the facets of that, because you can't just pour into one facet of yourself and think that that's just going to carry you. A lot of people think that, right? They pour themselves into a job, pour into a job, and then you see like everything else around you is just like, what happened here? Tom Brady. Oops. That was don't tell me I said that. Or pouring into anything really. Just pouring into one facet of your life and expecting everything else to, when you water a lawn, you don't just water one patch and just say, oh yeah, this is gonna be a great lawn, just watering this little tiny patch over here. No, you got to water that whole thing, right? And that's the same way our lives work. We have to water the whole thing if we want it to grow, right? If you can't expect everything to grow just from watering that one little patch and saying, oh yeah, I'm done, this is great. Right. And that's essentially what I was taught to do growing up, was just water this one aspect of my life and expect it to grow. And when it didn't, that's what kind of set me for a tailspin that I'm glad that I grew out of it, rather than, being led down a path into a situation that wasn't the best for me later. Now, I mean, it kind of did, the ex-boyfriend and everything. But again, by then I started learning more about some of the things I was doing that wasn't helping myself, right? I can put a lot of blame on him for a lot of things. Sure can, like, majority of things, quite honestly. But anyway, I can put a lot of things on him, right? But also, too, it's like, I chose that person, but why did I choose that person? Right? And how can I avoid that in the future, right? So yeah, I'm sorry if you were expecting any kind of juicy secrets. Nothing juicy. I can't say anything particularly juicy happened, but I did really mean literally how did that happen? Because I think a lot of times we say, dang, like, how did I get here? Like, what detour, what turn did I take to get to this place, right? A lot of times we don't really realize how that happened, or refuse to take responsibility for how that happened. I know for me, that was one of the reasons why I wasn't getting better, is because I refused to take responsibility for it until I did. And I'm like, okay, that's when I really started growing and really being able to help other people get out of their situations too. Because most recently, I'm so glad one of my clients, she finally got rid of, after I've been telling her for the longest time, I was like, girl, this dude is interesting for a lot of reasons. And she finally said, yeah, I just finally got rid of him. It's never too late to finally, have your personal light bulb go off, right? It's never too late, right? So hopefully, I really, really hope that that really helps someone. I can go on and on about some of it. One of the reasons why I didn't want to go into too many details is because that's just not cool to go into. I'll say what happened, but I don't want to go into too many details over it, like, again, too, because it was definitely a me thing, right? So I just want to kind of give a kind of idea of how a lot of things kind of come to pass and transpire, even though it wasn't, the initial stuff wasn't your fault. Like I said, for me, it started in childhood, but now that I'm an adult, I can really grab everything that's happened by the reins, right? Like, I have the power to, I'm the one who has the power to change my perception, change my surroundings, change my reality. And so that's what I've made the decision to do, right? So that's what I have for today. I'll have, I won't say what I have coming up. I have some other things coming up too. But make sure that I have a consultation link if you want to work with me down below. I specialize in life, love, mindset, all of the things. I do want to talk a little bit more about the idea of wellness coming up, because, again, a lot of people kind of just put that in the physical well-being bucket, but it actually encompasses your whole life. All of it, your whole life, y'all. All right. So all the links are below. Make sure you follow me on Instagram at I am blissalexandria. Make sure you get the I in the Alexandria. It's I am Bliss Alexandria. And so you have a great evening, afternoon, morning. All the blessings to you. Much love, peace, all the things, right? So thank you for watching, and until next time, okay?